check if everything is fine. I just have to hear the feedback. I just want more to check the feedback. I think you are live. I just need to check the feedback. One moment. I just have to wait for the feedback to come back, and then I know that we are okay, that you are alive. Yes, I think it's fine. Leroy, can you talk? Can you say something? Just to check if you are.
Yeah,
If you
just
are
do a quick
fine.
sound check. 1, 2, 3, 4,
Yeah, it's
5.
fine. It's fine. It's fine. Guys, I'm very glad here to have Daniel Leeroy. He's a YouTuber. He has his own channel called Objective Morality. Since we are going to have a conversation, like a dynamic conversation, but here the idea is that we don't have a guest. We have like we both talk to each other, exchange questions. So basically, he's from the channel Objective Ethics, and we got to know each other by Richard Carrier. We both interviewed Richard Carrier, and you saw that you had a lot in common. I saw some of his content on his channel, and we have the opportunity, since it's a kind of a dynamic conversation, I'll allow him to present himself and to talk a little bit about himself, and you can start the conversation. Please, Daniel Leeroy.
Well, I'd like to thank you very much, brother, for giving me the time to come and speak with you because, when you reached out to me, as you mentioned already, we had both talked to Dr. Richard Carrier. I'm a big fan of Dr. Carrier's as a philosopher. Really, I know him more as a historian. So when I started to engage in formal debates on objective morality from a secular position, in doing my research, I came across Richard Carrier's peer-reviewed work. And I thought, Richard Carrier is putting out peer-reviewed work on morality. That's really interesting because I've always known him from as a historian, especially when his Jesus mythicism and that theory and stuff. And so I was immediately interested in finding out more from what Richard Carrier's position would be on this particular topic. And I've done a lot of research and come across, because of my own interest in the field of morality, like Sam Harris. We had talked a little bit backstage about Sam Harris and Richard Carrier. And then, of course, the classics like Aristotle, Socrates, how does St. Thomas Aquinas? There's so many different ethical views on Nietzsche. There's so many people, David Hume, Kant, of course. There's so many people who have thrown their hat in the ring when it comes to the debate on morality. Is it objective? Is it subjective? And I find it to be a fascinating conversation, and there's a really lot to unpack there. But the thing that I get involved in personally with my channel is trying to help people understand that whether you think morality is objective or subjective, the one thing we know for sure is you do not need a God belief to be a good person. That's really important. And I think that's one of the things you and I were going to discuss today is morality from a secular worldview, because a lot of religious people, whether they mean to have ill intentions or not, they try to use morality as a cudgel or as a weapon against the non-believer to say, well, you don't believe in God, you cannot have access to morality. And of course, this is ridiculous, right?
That's so cool, so nice. It's a kind of funny story because I came to Richard Carrier by I wrote a book called it's a, I don't know if in English you have this name, but in Portuguese you create a kind of G Bible. It's a Bible. It's a GB book, G Bible. So it was a funny book. But then I came to Carrier as I was doing the research about Jesus. He was asking. I found one of his talk about did Jesus exist. And I was very impressed how easy he could explain, because I saw a lot of talk. I couldn't understand what people were saying, like very confused, too much information, but he could explain. He was compared, for example, to prove that Jesus most likely never existed. He was comparing what the Bible says about the several of the apostles. They were judged. They were somehow in jail. They were like beaten up, according to Richard Kelly. They were beaten up. Yeah? So So he was comparing what the Bible says versus what the Roman Empire generally do. And he showed that it was too crazy because it didn't match what they were trying to. So this approach in which you compare reality with the Bible, for me, it was very strong. And later, Kara commented on my blog, Scientific from Religion. I wrote something about Sam Harris, and he told me like Sam Harris didn't understand very well this part of the morality. Then I invite him. Maybe you could come here. I did not know that he was talking with morality. That he was working with morality. I was surprised to know that he was working with morality for more than 10 years. And recently, I found a very old debate. Kerry was still young. He was debating Willie Craig. Then he mentioned his book like Sense and Goodness, something like this. And he was really working with morality for a very long time.
Yeah, the title of that book, I think, if I remember right, is Sense and Goodness Without God. Yeah,
Yes, something like that.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. No, Richard Carrier, there's actually a few people who I have a lot of respect for in regards to their scholarship. There's a double PhD scholar, um, Bob Price, Dr. Robert Price. He's a double PhD candidate, and he actually has also adopted the mythicist position. So there's a number of actually very intelligent people that have taken the mythicist position. And my understanding is that theory, while Richard Carrier and others were vilified when they first suggested there might not be a historical Jesus, more and more people are starting to not only accept this hypothesis, but they're also starting to look into what's called Paul mythicism, that maybe even Paul didn't exist as a historical figure, So they're starting to open up the possibilities of, because that information that was basically put forth by the church has been controlled by the church and enforced by the church. And we know that the church represents a massive organization that has a tremendous amount of influence and control over the scholarship, as well as many other issues, politics, and so on and so forth. And so when they say mainstream or the majority of scholars think that Jesus existed, well, the majority of scholars have signed a document. It's called a statement of faith. And I attended a Bible college myself at one point because I was very fascinated by religion. I've never been a religious person, but I've studied much in college. I studied history, ancient history, and world religions, and was able to then audit classes at a Bible college. The reason I had to audit the classes, and for those of you who don't go to college or don't know, auditing a class means you pay extra money. You don't get credit hours and you don't work towards a degree, but you can attend the class and you get the coursework and stuff, so you could get the information. The reason I had to audit the classes at a Bible seminary is because I would not sign a statement of faith because I was not a religious person.
Maybe you could explain better because in Brazil, I don't think that you have this. You have this. I know that the American system is different. So you basically could attend a lesson without having a degree. So basically,
Yeah.
you do those every course, and later you can somehow use that during the university.
So with the auditing process, what that means is that you can attend a class and you can pay extra money, but you do not get credit hours. You're not getting any credit towards any type of a degree. So it's great if you have a hobby or a passion for learning a type of information and you just want the information. You don't want to register as a student with the campus and things of this nature, go through whatever their system is, then you can just pay an extra amount of money just to take one specific class. When it comes to, and not all colleges, not every college may not even allow people to do this. Most secular colleges, undergraduate schools would allow a person to do this. But when it comes to a Bible college, not all Bible college will even allow people to do this. But I have found two on the West Coast, one in California, one in Oregon, that allowed me to do this. So I took a handful of classes, about 6 different classes I took down in California and a couple more up in Oregon. And so learning things about like Marcion or how the New Testament was composed, a class on Luke. I took a class on the origins of atheism and agnosticism, different things like this. And one of the things that I was saying about the statement of faith, though, is in order to actually attend as a student, you must sign a contract with the school at the very beginning when you register that says you will affirm whatever their school, is doctrine is. And so different seminaries are going to have different, maybe it's a Trinitarian or a
Ah,
dispensationalist or what.
so it's a seminary.
A seminary. Yep. Bible college, seminary and Bible college, the same thing. Yeah.
Mm.
So it's a
Because I
Christian college that's specifically set up to teach people how to become ultimately working in the field of ministry, whether you be a teacher or an author, a professor,
ah,
something of this nature, a missionary.
at the beginning you wanted to be a missionary. No, you thought about it
Myself personally,
because you took the course, but you took the
yeah, no,
course
I did
because
not. I did not want to.
you
Yeah, no, I never wanted to actually work in a religious field, but I had a passion for studying this idea of religion because my
because
passion was really.
I saw a couple of people in Brazil, for example, some story that they started as a Christian in a seminary.
Mhm,
They
mhm.
did all the theology, but they became atheists as they they finished the course. So there was I was asked because I was asked because maybe you start as a Christian, so you were already an atheist. You were not a Christian.
Yeah, I've always been. I would refer to myself more as agnostic, but
Ah, yes,
it's
that's an interesting
there is
topic that I would
truth
like
to
to
that though.
bring.
Yeah, there is truth to that though. That atheism, agnosticism, people have different understandings of these words. I consider myself to be agnostic, but it is true. I do not believe in any gods. So you could apply the term atheist to me.
Yes,
It
because
doesn't
I
offend.
saw. I saw your debate. I saw your debate, but maybe now you can explain better. I even thought to post a reply to your debate. I saw your debate with that guy from a Muslim guy that you invite
Yeah.
him to a channel to prove
Mhm.
that God exists. I didn't watch all the debate. It's about 2 hours. I saw the beginning of the debate, then I thought to reply. Then one thing that made me a little bit confused, so you can maybe talk more about it, because you said in the beginning that you were agnostic. I mean, you were
Mhm.
agnostic, but most of the discussion, because the guy was there to prove that Allah exists. He was not there to prove
Mhm.
that the God of Spinoza or the cosmic God. He was there to prove that Allah exists. So basically, you don't believe in Allah. Do you believe in Allah? I think no.
No,
No.
no, I actually don't think that any gods exist. I don't. I really don't. I'm
So you
agnostic
are an
because
atheist. You are an atheist.
yeah, yeah, you could say
That's what I was
atheist.
thinking
The
in my
reason.
head because I don't know if you know about Peter Russell. Russell, why not a Christian? He say like this for people in general, like general people, I'm an atheist because if you say agnostic, no one understands what's agnostic. So when I'm talking to a philosopher, I'm agnostic.
Mhm.
When I'm talking to someone like generally speak, like general person, I'm an atheist because it's more direct. So
Mhm.
your conversation was a little bit confused because you said like I'm agnostic, but it was clear to me that you didn't believe in Allah. If you don't believe
Mhm.
in Allah, you are an atheist. Do you
That's
agree?
true. That's true. So for me, because I studied the history of agnosticism and atheism, going back to ancient Greece. So agnostic is a gnosis, without knowledge, and it was used in ancient Greece to describe people who neither believed nor disbelieved in the gods, but who also have a belief that you cannot know, because the gods were assumed to be outside of time and space or supernatural, and they cannot be observed or tested. So the
Because
Greeks, the ancient Greeks.
I think the biggest confusion about that is because there is two type of God that you can define. There is a deist God, which is a
Mhm.
Spinoza God, a cosmic God, like a guy is an energy. There is a Christian God or the Islamic God. This kind of God from the Bible is very specific. He has
Mhm.
feelings, he has desires. That, as I said, once I was in a debate with a friend of mine, he from a Brazilian channel. I said to him, regarding the Bible God, I'm atheist. Regarding a kind of general God, I'm agnostic because maybe there is a
Exactly.
force out there, but
Yeah.
I don't believe that this force is about like I don't believe that it has a feeling. I don't believe that it has a desire. I don't believe that it care about human. Like I don't know if you heard about the penguin god, the penguin god, like the god that his function is to eat other god. His only function
Oh
to eat
yes,
other
yes.
god. So
Right.
that kind of God could exist. Like it's like it's impossible for you to say that this God does not exist. But it was useless, like Spinoza, the Spinoza God. That God is useless because see, if God is nature and nature is God, it's useless. It's just like
You're absolutely right, brother. You're absolutely right. And I agree. I'm on the same 100% on the same page with you about that. When it comes to what we might call a deistic God, or like Spinoza, when he wrote and God and Nature, right? To Spinoza, that God is just simply another way of describing the phenomenon of nature. And I agree with that very much, that nature can be very amazing. And it does seem like, because when people started these God beliefs, they were really worshiping nature, right? We call it animism, is how religions really began in
no. That's
ancient
a, it's
history.
like I think they were actually worship a kind of human-like God, anthropomorphic God. Later in the, I think it was the Greek time, they start to worship a God that is a little bit more generic, like a deist God. But I think in the beginning they actually thought that the nature was a kind of angry, messy, let's say, a force that you want to either you sacrifice to me a goat and then
Mhm.
I will not punish you.
Yes, yes. No, you're right. So it's called animism, is where they would look at like the thunder or the rain on their crops or the lightning, things that they did not understand, that were natural phenomenon. They did not have an understanding of the scientific method. And the human brain has a tendency to do what we call anthropomorphize, right? We tend to see things in human traits or human types of characteristics. So this thunder and lightning was perceived by ancient man to be some type of emotion, because they only understood human emotion. They didn't understand the kinetic energy or the temperature or friction or things in the atmosphere. They had no idea what the science was. And so for them, what they could relate to was their own emotions of anger or joy or fear. So they would ascribe these human characteristics to natural weather phenomenon. Then, as they started to anthropomorphize the weather, it was called animism, animating the weather. Then they started to assume that the weather would have desires, right? So now we need to actually make offerings to the weather so that it will rain on our crops and we will start to grow food. And this starts to evolve these ideas over time, and they become much more complicated as the human brain becomes more evolved, because now the human brain is becoming more complex. By the time we get into where the philosophers start to come into play in Greece and things of this nature, now the gods are becoming really complex. Ancient Egypt, now we have these wonderful stories about the afterlife and the judgment and all these different things that get added and piled into this. And so it's this evolution over time, right? But like you were saying before, though, I agree that if a deistic God, just nature, and there actually is some type of fundamental consciousness, let's say, there comes a point to where we just cannot test these things. We have no way to actually
Yes,
discover.
but I think that's a very dangerous sometimes because I have written an essay about Michio Kaku. Michio Kaku, I don't know if you know, he's a physicist. He's a very famous physicist. Maybe you heard about him, but he was there was a debate between Richard Dawkins against several Christian, I don't know, in Mexico. And the Michio Kaku, which is a very famous physicist, he was in the middle. Then he was like an agnostic, like he was not an atheist, he was an agnostic. And he said like you can't prove or disprove. Like he said that both side was wrong. Like rich dog was wrong because he was saying there is no God, and the rich people was wrong because they say there is a God. I think this view a little bit dangerous because Michio Kaku, in my opinion, he's a very brilliant physicist. He's a scientific. I read a lot about him. I'm a big fan of Michio Kaku. He's a Japanese scientist, and but I think this idea a little bit dangerous because when a religious person talks about God, he's a very specific. Like Jordan Peterson like to say, like Jordan Peterson when he was debating Sam Harris, he liked to say about God, but he is a very generic. When you talk to a religious person, the person is very specific. They want a God that has feeling, that is angry, that he responds to the prayer. That kind of God, there is no chance, as I see it, that this kind of energy exists. And it should be very clear. Sometimes, like Peter Russell, I love Peter Russell because Russell was direct. Russell was not like, why not a Christian? He was written about 100 years ago. The book sounds like it was written yesterday because Bertrand Russell was very clear and direct. He didn't. I wrote a book recently called The Einstein Paradox. My book is in Portuguese. And I compare Albert Einstein with Bertrand Russell. They lived more or less at the same time. Einstein was very confusing and fuzzy, like the Spinoza God. I mean, Einstein was an atheist, but he could not say it.
Bertrand Russell is a really deep thinker, and I also like Richard Dawkins a lot. Actually, I'm a big fan of Richard Dawkins. In fact, I consider myself to be fortunate to be living at a time where I can actually see Richard Dawkins do his discussions and debates live. He's going to be a great loss when he passes away. He's a brilliant man, and I would agree with Richard Dawkins. And I think you might be alluding to this, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but maybe clarify for me if I'm wrong here, okay? But I think that we're all on the same page that when we have enough criteria for any claim, whether it's a God claim or science, any claim at all, doesn't matter. If we have enough criteria, enough data points to examine, we can make a determination. Yeah, this is absolute BS, or there might be some validity to it, or we have to suspend belief until we can further investigate. When the formal religions, what I call the organized religions, so the Abrahamic faiths, for example, when they give us this particular God, whether it's Allah, Yahweh, or Jesus, they have these fully developed stories, these narratives, and we have a lot of history that we can look at to compare when these stories were developing, what was actually happening in the real world. We also have science on our side that we can say, well, what does science tell us about the real world that we live in? And we can compare these claims, and we could say, you know what, this God does not exist. I could confidently say there was no Jesus God, there's no Yahweh God, there's no Allah God, because of the criteria has been given to us to make that judgment. I cannot say that there's no fundamental consciousness. I cannot say that nature and God are not indistinguishable. There's things I cannot say. I would say, as far as Spinoza's God, it's called a distinction without a difference, right? Or a difference without a distinction. It's a fallacy, right? You say these two things are different, but when we compare them, they're actually the same thing. And I think that's what Spinoza's God really is when you call nature God or God nature, you're really talking just about the same fundamental forces that create life, right? So if there's no actual distinction between the two, there's no difference, then why try to distinct one from the other? Maybe there is an actual God behind nature, but we cannot discover that. But if you tell me that God created the heavens and the earth in 7 days, and we created light, and then 4 days later created the sun, I could say, no, this is not how physics work. We don't get light without the sun. You don't create light and then have the sun 4 days later. It doesn't make sense because we have no way to delineate days without a day-night cycle, and we need the sun for the day-night cycle, right? So we could look at contradictions. Are there internal contradictions with the character of these gods? And we could say contradictions cannot exist logically, right? So we could use criteria to say, yeah, these gods don't exist.
Yes, but I agree with you on a point because sometimes they misunderstand the atheists. They say that the atheists say for sure there is no God. We don't say it, at least not me, and not most of the atheists. For example, let's suppose in a hypothetical case that a kind of force, something strange, got in touch with the guys that wrote the Bible. They were there, they were walking in the desert, and they somehow got in touch with a kind of very strange phenomenon. And they wrote about this phenomenon like it's a god. They could have encountered something very strange. It doesn't mean that it's a god. It could be an alien that came here like a long time ago. This alien decided to talk to this guy that wrote the Bible, but it doesn't mean that what they wrote is correct. It just means that they found something strange. But it's very bizarre because, for example, let's say the case of, I don't know how to say in English, in Portuguese, Bemuthi. It's a kind of a monster in the book of Job. They have 7 monsters in the book of Job. I try to make a reconstruction of this monster using AI. You don't know which kind of monster is that. It could be an elephant, it could be a saber tooth. We don't know because the Bible is so strange. They cannot define anything. It's very so fuzzy. So maybe they saw something, but they didn't know how to write it.
Well, that's where it gets a little sticky, because we want to be fair and reasonable in all of our judgments, right? We don't want to use because we all have a bias in whatever our position is, and we all have certain presuppositions that we adopt. For the atheist or the skeptic, our presupposition is that, our senses are somewhat reliable. Our memory is going to be somewhat reliable. The scientific method is a reliable method, even though scientists themselves can be fallible, right? So we take on certain presuppositions. We're not solipsist. We don't fall into solipsism, things of this nature. And so every single person has some kind of biases and presuppositions. We have to take that into account when we judge these things, right? So I tend to look more at because I do a lot with ethics and morality. So I look at these problems and I say, when you compare internally what the story is saying, what are you using to base your judgment on? Do you have any external factor? Do you have human empathy? Excuse me, I'm sorry. I am trying to get over a cold. I should have mentioned at the beginning of this, so my voice is gotten out. But we have, if we know that how a good father would treat his children in the real world, we can compare the relationship with this heavenly father and the way the heavenly father treats us as his supposed children. And we can compare, is that a good father or is that not a good father? Justice, we know what true justice is, right? Justice requires fairness at a fundamental root, which means treating like cases alike. We don't punish some stranger for somebody else's crime. That's unjust. We know that. We would never allow a system like that in the modern world, right? So when people say, well, God's ways are higher than our ways, we're not in a position to judge this God character, I say, absolutely, we are. In fact, we have a responsibility to make these judgments. Right?
It's a mysterious ways.
Right.
It's a mysterious way. Yes, but it's a little bit bizarre when you think about it, because sometimes, because when you grow up, when you grow up in Brazil, for example, you always think that Christianity is bizarre just in Brazil. But when you start to see the debate in USA, you start to see the debates. Like I saw, there's another channel. It's a women channel, just women, and
yes,
I love this channel. Yes,
I can't think of the name of it. I can't think of the name of it, but I saw it recently myself about a month ago. It's their smaller group, right?
Yes, they join together. So
Yeah.
I saw some of the debate, like pro-life, pro-choice. Then I saw one atheist against the 20 Christian, like just women. And you hear very bizarre stuff. You think to yourself, how people can say that? For example, one woman, she was close to a Jewish woman, and she compared the abortion to Holocaust, and the woman said, the Jewish woman said, I'm very offended, because it's not fair that you compare your abortion clinics, your abortion organization, with one of the most bizarre stuff that human did in history. She didn't apologize. She said, like, I'm still keep my word. Like, I mean, how can people say that close to some? I mean, Christians sometimes can be crazy. Like they do not seem to have feeling, like because they believe they have a kind of a God that. So I sometimes try to understand why people. I had the feeling that these women, the Christian women, based on how they were talking, they were abused the women. Recently, I was in a documentary from USA about how many women are in jail because of abortion. It's USA. They are like 20 years, 30 years in jail because very bizarre case. Like one case, a woman, she was unable to defend because she was being abused. So she decided to leave the house to look for another house. In the meanwhile, her husband decided to beat her kid. She was in jail because she was unable to protect her kid. It's a very bizarre. It's a Christian nationalism. Like they were like the mayor was clear a Christian nationalist. He was very proud of that. I mean, it's a very bizarre stuff when you see in a documentary.
No, you're absolutely right. It's sometimes I try not to get angry about it and emotionally involved, because I think that we should, especially when we want to change people's minds, we need to really focus on logic, because their emotions are already attached so deeply to this. And so if you try to fight emotions with emotions, you're going to be very unsuccessful, in my opinion. So we need to use logic and reason to address these issues, because they are very important issues. I do formal debates. I'm doing quite a bit of them these days. I've only been doing the formal debates for about a year or so now. And almost all of my debates have been about biblical morality or morals without God. And so I think I mentioned I'm doing another one coming up here on the 8th on the Raging Tomato channel. I'll be debating against two Christians. Can you have morality without God based on empathy, natural law, or reason? Well, of course you can. But you have to the idea that these people are convinced that without the belief in God, without the existence of a God, human beings have no access to what they ought do or ought not do. The idea to me is so strange. I don't understand how a person, I literally see it as like flat earth level ignorance, right? There are people who think the earth is flat. I don't understand. I can't comprehend how people can be this stupid. Sorry, not trying to be mean when I say that, but to me, it's just, I just cannot understand how people can be this ignorant. Same thing with the morality. To say that, even to make the claim that abortion is a murder, to me is so strange. I had a person talking to me the other day about this, that he called the fetus a person. I said, what do you think person means? What is personhood? How do you even, the fetus has no agency, no will, doesn't set goals, doesn't take actions, is not able to exist independently. How can you define that as a person or give personhood to that? And he says, well, because the Bible says birth starts at conception. Well, the Bible doesn't actually say that. That's what Christians interpret into the Bible. But even I grant him that the Bible did say that, which again, it doesn't. So life starts at conception is a scientific term that, yes, this is the beginning stages of where life will start, but that doesn't mean that is a person, right? That's conflating these terms together. And so if you allow people to conflate these terms together, then pretty soon the term murder can be applied inappropriately. And if murder can be applied in a single case, it can be extrapolated to a genocide. And if it can then be applied as a genocide, well, you can compare it to anything like the Holocaust or whatever else you might want to do. Very dangerous rhetoric, because it gets people thinking along these lines, which are not based in reality, not based on any truth, not based on any science. But religion teaches people so often to deny science. A lot of times religious people or fundamentalists will say that evolution is not true. The earth is only 6,000 years old. There was a global flood. None of these things are true. They're demonstrably false. We have all the evidence that we need to say the earth is 4.5 billion years old. There was no global flood. Evolution is true. We know how people evolve, how organisms evolve. We have a tremendous amount of evidence to support all of this.
Sorry, I had a very small problem. Sometimes my computer give a small problem here. But anyway, go
I just
on.
kept talking. I hope to save the show.
No problem. I'm pretty sure that you did very well. Go on, you
Excellent.
finish your
So yeah, I
you
think
may
I think
finish.
you're right. But when it comes to this comment, like the comparing abortion to the Jewish Holocaust, this is broken. This is mentally disconnected from reality. What happened during the Jewish Holocaust is a stain on humanity, that human beings can still be this evil and degenerate at this point in our evolution. When you compare abortion, a scientific procedure that is really falls under medical care, to something like this, when they're not even remotely related, this is what religion, it breaks your mind. And I believe, and I've said this many times, I've done formal and informal debates, religion actually leads you to moral bankruptcy. It doesn't help you gain morality. It takes you the opposite direction.
Yes, recently I have translated to Portuguese an essay from Richard Carey, What's the Harm? And he was, because there is a some Harris and the Rich Dawkins. They believe that the moderate religion, the moderate form, the let's say the soft form, they are pretty bad as well. In the case of Richard Carroll, he believes that the moderate form of religion is a kind of a middle step. He was basically saying about that because in his paper of 2025, actually 25, I think it was the same paper that he talked to me. Then I think the same paper that you found. He basically said like this, basically like this. He gave the example of the Amalekite. I think the name is Amalekite, in which God gave the order to kill everyone, even the baby, the donkey, everything. The bizarre, let's say, behavior is how people need to justify that. I follow a lot the atheist experience, the podcast atheist experience, and sometimes you see the Christian try to justify. For example, I watched some debate. For example, one case of slavery. Some Christians say that slavery was necessary because God did want to destroy the economy. The economy was necessary, so slavery, God didn't do anything because he needed to keep the economy stable. But imagine how bizarre is you think about a God that you are all powerful, but he cannot find the economy that does not depend on slavery.
I've heard. Yes, no, brother, you're right. I've heard all of these. These are really bad arguments that the Christians are making. The idea,
they're very proud. They say it very proud. It's like
they say it loud and they say it with a smile on their face and they say praise Jesus every time. You know, it makes no sense. It's because I don't normally have a lot of discussions informally with believers because I find that you tend to push a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew in particular, even a Hindu, depending. There's atheistic types of Hinduism. So there's different, it depends on how you approach the situation. But when it comes to the anthropomorphic God beliefs, particularly the Abrahamic faiths, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, when you really get in and can debate these people, right? And you know your history, you know the Quran, you know the Bible, and you know philosophy, and then know science, you have all the tools that you need to basically reject all of their claims. And you push them into one of two corners. You push them into cognitive dissonance or moral bankruptcy. And it always goes that direction. And so they either spin their wheels when they're trying to defend an unscientific claim, like the sun being created after light, 4 days after light. That's inexplicable because it just can't work that way. You know physics yourself.
Then they like the kind of the ark, they say that was kind, not species kind, like whatever that means. It makes no sense. There is a debate between Bill New and Hum, I think Ken Hum. And Bill New did a very fast calculation. How fast you need a species to evolve? Like you see a bird in the day. In the night, the bird was gone because it was extincted. It's basically impossible for you to have this kind of speed for the evolution to work. It's supposed to have a kind of kind, whatever that means. They never define what's a kind.
Yeah, there's no taxonomy. There's no taxonomical kind. You have family, genus, species, clave. I mean, kingdom. Right? We have all these different, taxonomical divisions to understand the evolutionary process, and kind is just a way of that an ancient Bronze Age culture would look at something and say, oh, that looks like a horse or that looks like a dog, and that's their understanding.
Like in the case of in my book, I give this example. The case of bat, they classify as bird because it flies, so it's a bird.
Right. But it's actually
bat
not
a mammal. It's a mammal. It's like human,
right.
Exactly. The hand of the bat like similar to your hand. I have one question for you. It's a curiosity. It's a kind of share with you. You are American, right?
Yes, that's correct. American. I live on the West Coast. Yep.
Yeah, but you are American. Today it's very hard to say what's American. They want to define. They want to say like the true American, but you are American. Today they're trying to
Yes,
define to
I was
say like,
born in America. I'm technically Irish. My family's Irish, but I was born in America. Yep.
but they consider you an American.
Yes. Uh-huh.
So okay. So sometimes I have this kind of I'm not saying nightmare, but it's a kind of fear because I saw a lot of episode of the atheist experience. I saw Christians say stuff online by atheist experience that is very scary. They defend slavery. They're not afraid of that. So I think to myself, imagine if the atheists for the United States they are unable to hold back those Christians, this crazy Christian. Now I just read very fast. I mean, very fast. They decided Utah is not a kind of Christianity because Utah has a Christianity that's very crazy. They decided there's a list of Christianity. The Utah is out of the list. I thought to myself, imagine this guy, this Christian, with the atomic bomb, with the most powerful army of the world, if the most advanced technology come from USA, is a very powerful country, military power, technology. Imagine this crazy guy if the atomic bomb trying to let's say to evangelize people, trying to impose like sometimes I'm afraid that they will bring back slavery. Like they're not ashamed of slavery. They say it online like it experience. It's like something normal. It's a fear that I have. Imagine the Donald Trump is basically he threat Greenland that he would take Greenland away. He threat everyone, even Brazil. He said that he would attack. He went to Venezuela. Imagine if Donald Trump has no like no Congress, no one to hold him back. Imagine Donald Trump without no holding back.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, brother. So I'm not really concerned about Christian nationalism for one reason. Now, it is extremely dangerous potentially. If people were to actually come into power and enforce Christian nationalism, it would be most dangerous for the people within this country, more so than internationally, believe it or not, because they would shut down abortion, so women would no longer get health care. That would be a terrible setback. I don't know that they would institute slavery, but their immigration policies and deportation policies would be outrageous. Crime, the strictness on different crimes, things that are not illegal that would become illegal, especially things that might affect like the transgender community or the LGBTQ community. They would take away gay marriage. So there would be a real regression on the people of America. I don't know internationally how that would all pan out, to be honest with you. But the reason I don't take this threat seriously isn't because it wouldn't potentially be very terrible. It would, certainly. But in order to run a successful coup, if you look historically at the successful takeovers of governments, especially a power like the United States, you need to have a very well-organized effort, a collective that has a direct mission statement and has access to resources and the people's ear, usually, right? The populace behind them. Christianity just does not have that kind of power, even if we just assumed for a moment that all the Christians in America were the same type of Christians. There still aren't enough of them. But we have to understand the reality is, like you mentioned, Utah, there's just one branch of Christianity called Mormonism. Then you have the Catholics. Then you have the Baptists, the Protestants. I mean, if you think there's a lot of debates between atheists and Christians, you ought to watch Christian versus Christian. That's
Yes,
all
I
over
saw.
the place. Yeah,
I saw one very fast. I thought it was worse than it was like a evangelical against Catholic. I had a feeling that was worse than against atheists. It was very heavy. I didn't see all the debate. I just saw it very fast, but I had the feeling that the energy was much worse than compared to what
it's
the
it's
debate.
insane. They cannot agree on anything. In fact, when I've had debates here, I recently had a formal debate myself against a Christian. Should we use the Bible as the basis for morality? And I explained in my debate, and the reason I do so well in that particular debate topic, I've debated that topic, I think 2 or 3 times now. I've done very well because before I even get into like the stories of slavery or like the Amalekites and throwing rocks at disobedient children, before I even get into those particulars, the very first thing that I do in my opening is I point out that there's 40,000 plus different denominations of Christians alone fighting over what the Bible means. So you cannot use this as the basis for any type of government, because 40,000 different groups of people can't even agree on it, and they believe in the God, they believe there's truth, they believe the Holy Spirit, and they still can't agree with each other on what the Bible actually means. So it would be dysfunctional to think that you could use something like that to build a government on. If 40,000 different groups of people who actually believe it's true can't even agree with each other on what it means.
Yes, and that was. I'm not a historian in the USA, but I sometimes I read, sometimes I see documentary, sometimes I see debates. It seems that USA was built to avoid this kind of madness because Donald Trump. I even written a couple of blog about that. There is this guy that he wrote how to save the democracy. I forgot his name, but basically it seemed that USA decided to build a country that was they try to avoid two different let's say threats to USA democracy. First is a dictator, is a president that would be a dictator. Second, that a religion would take over the country. Donald Trump is basically both of them in one. So he's like a religion guy that has all these crazy people behind. He act like he don't he does not like to hear that. He get a little bit angry. I saw in some interview he called him fascist. He is not very happy about that, but his behavior is like that.
Donald Trump, excuse me. Donald Trump is a very interesting character. Because I don't know the man personally and I'm not involved officially in politics, I really can only just look from the outside in. As an American citizen, my prices for groceries and gasoline, my property taxes, the rent we pay, the mortgages, these things they rise and they fall. This is based more on economics than it has to do with who's in the office. Some things he can affect directly, like when he's bombing Iran right now and fighting over the Strait of Hormuz, the gasoline prices go up. Right? Obviously, the oil price go up, it affects the gasoline prices. So the president does have some direct control over the economics, but it's really has to do more with the banking system, the stock market. Things are really not in the president's, purview. So for us, we're looking at, okay, is the president going to get us involved in a world war? That's something we have to be very concerned about. Is the president going to try to pass legislature that's going to make gay marriage illegal? These are the types of things we have to be concerned about. But Donald Trump is only a representation of a system that does have checks and balances and does tend to overcorrect. When it self-corrects, it overcorrects. Because if we look at the previous president, Joe Biden, the criticism with Joe Biden was that he was so mentally incapable, he was so old and senile that he wasn't really the president. He was just like the face of the country, but there were people behind him who were actually making all the decisions. So that was the previous president. And now we go to this president, Donald Trump, who won't give up any control, who is now seen as a dictator. So we're overcorrecting too much all the time.
Yes, I think not a debate. I saw a conversation from Hillary, not Hillary. I forgot her name. The one that was previously competed with Donald Trump. I forgot her name, but anyway, that lost. She lost the election, and she was talking about
Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris, yes, right,
Yep,
correct.
yep.
And I thought she was brilliant because she could explain precisely what Donald Trump is doing. For example, the trust. Donald Trump is lose the trust of everyone. Like he decided to threat Europe. He called Europe a sick, weak country. He said that he would take over Greenland. It doesn't matter if you're going to do it or not, but it's still, he created a kind of instability. The relationship between Brazil and USA, it has always been a good relationship. If you take the history of Brazil, the history come back from the emperor, the Dom Pedro II, our emperor. He was very close to USA. Brazil is supposed to be called United States of Brazil. The first name was United States of Brazil. It was USB. He was inspired in the United States. So he decided that everyone is an enemy. It does not matter how how old is the relationship? So Kamala Harris, she was basically explained like that. Even if Trump leave tomorrow, the damage is already done. Like he tried to tax Brazil several times. Like he tried first, then the Supreme Court said that it's not legal. You can do it. Then he started to invent. He created a big lie. Like the guy lie all the time. That he in Brazil you have like children work, and then because of that like, you are going to tax you because all your labor is children, like abusing children. It's a big lie. It's true that you have problem if children working, but we are trying our best to fix it. So the guy lives a lie. Like as I was talking to Richard Carrer, I proposed to Richard Carrer, like the model of Carrer, he said that the system to be moral, to be a moral system, you need to be well informed. And I asked him, what about Donald Trump? The Donald Trump is basically he lies all the time. His people, he said like he's about half of the United States. He said like a deer in the headlight, deer in the headlight, like they're totally lost. So basically, the damage is already done, I believe.
Yeah, that is there's that is a problem because what Donald Trump is doing that will affect America on the long term very negatively is as you say, when you damage these relationships after Donald Trump is out of office, and hopefully we don't put somebody like JD Vance in replace. We don't need another type of Donald Trump to just step in. That would be a real disaster. But I think the people are seeing what a problem Donald Trump is because, as you said, he's literally lied boldly about everything his promises were. He was going to end all wars, and he has been fighting since day one.
About 10 wars.
Yeah, already since day one. He hasn't ended anything. He's actually started a couple. Then, it's, as you said, the relationship with other countries. We're going to take Greenland, whether they like it or not. He was going to try to take part of Canada. You know, we should have a very good relationship with Canada. We should be living symbiotically with Canadians. You know, the thing that these politicians don't seem to understand is that because not enough of them are taking the global system, especially when it comes to the environment, seriously, especially people on the far right. They deny climate change, human caused climate change. This kind of stuff, we're seeing the terrible effects of what human caused climate change is doing right now. And we've been, banging this drum for the last 20, 30 years, almost 40 years now, right? We've been saying, hey, this is a problem ever since the industrial revolution. We're noticing that greenhouse gases and pollution and global warming is spiking. This is not a coincidence. And we're tracking this. And they warned us 40 years ago. They warned us 30 years ago and 20 years ago, 10 years ago. We're talking about it today. And people, or a lot of them are religious, are still just hand waving it away. God's in control of the climate. God's in control of the weather. Oh my God, So these are long-term problems. The relationships that you break down with your neighbors, like Brazil, South America, with Canada, with people on the other side of the world, because this is something I talk about a lot on my channel. The key to happiness, true happiness, is fundamentally pretty simple. You need respect for the planet because that's the environment we live in. You need self-respect, and you need to have respect for others. And you can build everything up from those three principles, right? The self-respect, people get very confused because they don't understand the middle way. They think that an ego and pride, it has self-respect is the same thing. It's not. The ego is too far. Self-loathing is too far. Self-respect is that perfect place in the middle, like Aristotle would talk about the golden mean, or the Buddha would call the middle way. That's where self-respect lies. If we don't have and understand self-respect, it would be impossible for me to truly respect you or anybody else because I don't even know what respect is. So these are working together. The planet is crucial because we all live on this planet. You don't want to shit in your own living room, right? Because you live there. So you would not want to do this to the planet because we cannot escape this planet. We are all sharing this planet. What America does with the atmosphere can affect the ozone, will affect the ozone in China, will affect the ozone in Brazil, because we all sharing the same planet, right? And so This is the idea we need to have working together. We need to have smaller families. Less large families at this point is a big problem because there's too many people on the planet. We need to have smaller families. We need to start working together. We need to understand that if my neighbor is living his best life, that's the most guaranteed opportunity that I can get that I'm going to live a good life. Because if my neighbor's not hungry, he's not likely to come steal my food. If my neighbor's not sick, he's not likely to get me sick. If my neighbor has a good education, he's more likely to be a benefit to my community, right? So if my neighbor is mentally healthy, he's less likely to want to commit a crime to steal my happiness. So for selfishly, I can say, I want my neighbor to be living his best life because that's how I'm going to live my best life. And then we need to understand that the neighbor is not just the guy who lives next door to me, but he's got a neighbor and that person has a neighbor. And pretty soon, all around the world, we realize that we are somebody's neighbor. So we have this global idea of how we can make the world better, how we can improve it, and we can do it for selfishly for ourselves. I want to live my best life. So I know that for Daniel Leeroy to be living his best life, Brother Perez needs to be living his best life down in Brazil, right? The people in Russia need to be living their best life. The people in China, the people in Turkey, everywhere. And that's how I'm going to live my best life because we're all going to be taking care of the planet and taking care of each other.
So remember that you can as well do questions. You can as well start a conversation. But I have a question for you that I did for a French activist. Yesterday, I had a conversation with a French activist, Gilles Ragnot, and it has to do with United States. I don't know if you heard about it. I don't know if you saw somewhere, but there is a scientist, a group of scientists in Utah. They did a very interesting, but I did a very strong critique of this paper. They published two papers, not in a journal. They published a preprint. Preprint is a research that's still under investigation. They published one that I did a very strong critique. They took several chatbots like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, all these large language models, and they have proven, they have shown that the model does not start a conversation about religion. The chatbot you never introduce religion. Like if you ask, for example, I'm facing a very difficult problem in my life. I have done a huge amount of mistakes, and what should I do? The model will always give you like secular, even meditation. The model will ask you to do meditation, to look to a psychologist, to do therapy, to do secular. And the author, they claim that the chatbot should introduce religion because they say religion is important to billions of people. Therefore, the chatbot should start a religion conversation. It's what done in Utah. To be fair, they have used human for all over the United States, but the let's say the headquarters is Utah. I have already invited the author. He like said that he'll come to a live with me. I did an invitation, but my critique was very strong. I'm not sure they have changed his mind. Anyway, how do you feel that a chatbot created in the United States is going to talk about religion like this chatbot they use everywhere in Brazil, in France, and like the chatbot is created in Silicon Valley, but they are used all over the world. Imagine a situation: you start a conversation with chatbot, the chatbot talk about your priest, about your sin. It sounds very bizarre. What do you think?
That is really interesting, and I'd have to. I'm shooting from the hip here because I haven't heard this before, so I reserve the right to change my answer later. But I would say, just off the face of this question, I find it more plausible and more sustainable for the initial example, where the LLM is just giving the secular view, because we can study through psychology, through neuroscience, and through history of what has worked and what hasn't worked. So if like historically we can say everybody was practicing slavery, right? And we can look at that practice and say, well, we've moved away from slavery globally now. Now, that's not to say that people don't still do it, but it's illegal. Every country, slavery is actually illegal in every country now. So what has changed? We see historically there's been a change, and the LLM can look at this and use this as data, right? And we can say, well, we've realized that the idea of owning another human being as property affects their freedom, not just their freedom, but their well-being. And we find that when we affect other people's freedom and well-being, it has a negative impact on society. And when we have a negative impact on society, well, we live in society. That means we're actually hurting ourselves by doing this. And the LLM can use these data points to come to this understanding without any religion or anything crazy to be added to it. That's the most sustainable model right there. The problem is, and the reason that they told the LLM, well, maybe you should consider adding this religion, they're forced to by the numbers. Because if you think about it, the studies that I've looked into, 92%, according to Pew Research, the last study I looked at, 92% of the 8.5 billion people on this planet are religious. That's a staggering number, 92% of the people. And that's in the modern...
I think this number, you should, because religion is very generic. I think about half the Abrahamic religion, because the Japanese religion, for example, Buddhism, I think it should be, sometimes this number make me a little bit uncomfortable, because the Abrahamic religion, they are very specific. They are very, I don't know, I wanted to use a better word, but they are crazy. I want to use a better word, but they have a God in the center. They have a couple of rules, but if you compare to the Buddhist, for example, recently I was on Twitter, and someone atheist, like the intention was good, but I think the post was bad. They post a world map. They put a cross all over the world, like in Brazil, United States, it has a cross. Then they put a Islam symbol in the region. So, and they said something like, none of this. I don't remember, but something like, this country, they are not religion by nature. Something like that. I explained to them that, for example, in Brazil, most of the indigenous religion, at least the one that I studied so far, they do not have the idea of God, not in the sense of, a monotheistic, like centered God, like Iara. I was studying Iara. Iara was a goddess. It was a goddess. I think. She was indigenous. Today, you can see a statue of her, but it was not the same relationship like the Abrahamic religion. They have a center God that you give, tell everyone what to do. Like they have a sacred book with a couple of rules that you're supposed to follow. So when you talk about 90% of people are religion, I know what you mean. That's spiritual somehow. They have a kind of a relationship with. That was the thesis of the paper. But the paper something like that. Like most of the world like have a kind of religion. I think that it can be a little bit misleading, because the Abrahamic religion, they are very specific.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right about that, brother. And I think, and just allow me to just kind of land the plane here. And I think because I agree with you 100%, that these numbers can be very misleading depending on what they're being used for. So when I say religious 92%, what I'm talking about specifically for bringing this up is that religion claims to offer something that science and even to a degree philosophy cannot answer. And that is, where did we come from? What are we doing here? What is our purpose? And where do we go when we die? Science cannot address this. Not truly, right? Philosophy can dabble in this, but cannot really address this. Religion claims to give us this answers. Where did we come from? Why are we here? Where are we going? And it turns out that a lot of people, the majority of people, it turns out, really feel uncomfortable if they don't think they have an answer to those three questions. So it doesn't matter if you have an Abrahamic religion or a Buddhism, a Hinduism, any type of reincarnation, because these religions do give us, even Buddhism, which a lot of people refer to me as a secular Buddhist because I do study Buddhism as a philosophy. I apply this to my life a lot, but I'm not a Buddhist. I don't believe in karma or reincarnation in the way that it's presented, in the religion. I do believe in cause and effect. So I think if I am mean or rude to my wife, disrespect my wife, she's not going to respect me. She might leave me for a better man or something. You know what I mean? If I don't make money, take care of my family, they might not respect me. So there's cause and effect there. Is it karma? You call it whatever you want. I don't think there's a cosmic element to it per se. But the thing about these religions, even with Buddhism, talk about reincarnation. Hinduism has to do with reincarnation. The Abrahamic faith, you get to go to heaven if you're the good boy. You look even at Egyptian mythology, right? Your heart, your soul, the record of your life is weighed on Ma'at's scale. They call it against Ma'at's feather, right? The scales of life, and it balances. If it balances with Ma'at's feather, which represents the truth, then you get to go on to the afterlife, right? We look at Zoroastrianism, that there's the cosmic battle between the Druze, which is the lie, and Ahura Mazda, who represents the truth. And so there's going to be this ultimate settling, and the truth is ultimately going to win out, and then everybody gets to live in the new heaven and new earth. And I could go down the list of all of these different religions. They all tell us basically the same thing. Where did we come from? They have these creation narratives about the gods or the God creating heavens and earth, separating the sky, separating the water from the land, and so on and so forth. They have, what are we doing here? The gods give us purpose. The gods created us. They give us the rules. Where are we going? We get to go the afterlife. So 92% of the people in the whole planet, 8.5 billion people, 92% of them are attached to this needing to know those three answers. And that is
Yes,
why.
that is one of the problems of the paper that I mentioned to you, because I called the infinite benchmark, because that precisely, I think that's the mistake. You are, the paper did a similar, let's say, approach that you use. You use approach that, well, when you are talking about the God created, the world, it's Abrahamic religion. Because, for example, the paper, they had a huge data set called the White Chat. It's a public data set. They had to filter out they had to select which question to use. So basically, they have chosen like a kind of a set of parameters. They have chosen like I think it was death. It was. I can't remember. I think it was a marriage. They have chosen a set of topic that was important to give the AI. When you take a look on the topic, they are all of them, they are from Abrahamic religion. Then I did a kind of a joke. In my blog post, I even published this kind of a joke. Imagine a religion in Brazil, which is this religion exists. It's called I think in English, a guy called cassava. It was mandioca, cassava. There is a legend on this religion in which the cassava, in Portuguese we call it mandioca, it was born from a virgin. A virgin gave birth to a girl. Her daughter died very young. When she was buried, the cassava, mandioca, was born. Then I did the follow joke. Imagine if the chatbot, whenever someone asks, where does the cassava come from? Where the mandioca come from? The chatbot has to explain the scientific explanation, but also introduce the legend of the cassava, of the indigenous people. Their model of religion just work if you consider the Abrahamic religion. So they said religion is important to billions of people. The question that I did on my post, which religion? Because there are so many. And the description that you just gave here, most of them apply to Abrahamic religion. For the Buddhism. Buddhism does not have the creation. The God does not have a God. Does not have a creation. Buddhists are not worried about how the world was created. That there is no creation on the Buddhism. It depends a lot of this variation. Maybe there's a syncretism, but most of the Buddhism that I know about, for example, the Zen Buddhism, which is very common in Brazil, they do not have this kind of creation. They do not care about science in the sense that they had to make a debate with atheists to prove that atheist is wrong. It's a Christian, it's Abrahamic stuff.
There's a lot of truth to that. Like in Buddhism, for example, there's no beginning. There's a big difference, because when we talk about creation, we are implying a beginning to things, right? Whereas in Buddhism, for example, it's an endless cycle, and in Buddhism also, again, we should be clear, there are many different types of Buddhism. It's not just Buddhism, it's like anything else, right? There's many different branches. And so it's a general concept that there's no creation. There's no God in Buddhism, generally speaking, right? There's the bodhisattvas and there's the devas, but there's no actual like creator God or this type of a thing. So Buddhism is unique in that way. Also in Buddhism, one of the many things I like about Buddhism, and why when I talk to religious people, if I don't get a feeling that they can ever abandon their need for religion, I always tell them, go be a Buddhist, go study Buddhism, because it's a much nicer religion. You're not going to kill anybody, not just to say people who are Buddhists don't do bad things, but Buddhism itself does not teach, like the Amalekite story. You're never going to hear the Buddha say, go kill the women and children, something like that.
There is even a nice story that Christopher Hitchens, I think he got it wrong in the book God's Not Great. He gives this example in Buddhism, of the king called Ashoka in his book God's Not Great. But I think his book is religion poison everything. So he had to fit Buddhism on the same recipe, like Buddhism is a dangerous religion like Christianity. But he did not sure if he did by purpose. I don't know if he was trying to force the model. He had the model religion poison everything, so he had to put everything in the same model. And then he tells the story of Ashoka, but he does not explain very well the story of Ashoka. Ashoka was interesting because Ashoka was an emperor in India, and he caused a very bad war. He killed several people. So one day he went to the battlefield and he saw all this body killed, all this blood. He decided to be a Buddhist. So what he did to pay his debt with the world, he decided to build hospitals. He decided to build a nice place for people to stay. His debt, was if the humanity. But what about Christianity? When you do something bad, you build a church, you give money to the church. So when Oshaka did, I think his name was Oshoka, and I think he did something very bad. Instead of trying to ask for forgiveness to a God, instead of pay a money to a church, how to build a church to pay his bad karma, he decided to do to pay to the humanity, like do nice thing, hospital to animals. So that the big difference between Buddhism in Christianity, because Christianity you always have to pay to the church, to the priest, to some kind of middleman. In the case of Buddhism, at least as you said, you are right. There are several types of Buddhism. You cannot say like Buddhism is a very generic term, but most of the time, the like karma, the idea of karma, you are paying for something here. Even in the case of hell, there is hell. Some brand of Buddhism you have hell, but your let's say your death is limited. You will not be punished forever. Christianity, you go to hell, you'll be punished forever.
Yeah, eternal conscious torment, which is insane to say that a loving God, a perfectly loving God, would subject somebody to eternal conscious torment. And it gets even crazier when you realize that it doesn't really matter your actual crimes against the God. The terrible, the people who did like the Holocaust we talked about earlier, they're going to go to the same hell that a guy who maybe stole a candy bar is going to go to, right? I mean, it's crazy.
Do you know why that? Do you know why that is the case? Do you know the case? Why?
Well, I mean, because the sin, the reason people are sent to hell isn't based on their behavior.
No, I mean, what I meant, the eternal punishment. The eternal punishment. Why Christianity decide to punish people forever? Do you know the?
No, I don't. I don't know for 100%, because this is actually an evolution.
Because there is previously I mentioned to you there is a women channel, women channel like the debate, And there is this debate between one atheist, a woman that was atheist, against 20 Christian. They are all of them were women. One of them said something like this: like I was a promoter. I used to judge people in the justice system in the United States, and she said something like that. Why our hell in Christianity is like forever? And she said like when you make something against a judge, like there is a judge, you like hit the judge, like so your punishment will be different from if you hit somebody else, like someone on the street. There is this book by George Minoir, I think his name is George Minoir. He explained that the initial idea of hell in Christianity was to punish because God was considered a infinite entity. It's a very infinite entity. It was a very important entity. So hell was not created to punish when you do something against humanity. It was created when you do something against God. Since God is infinite, the punishment is infinite. The case, the reason why I mentioned the case of this woman that she was baited, that she was compared the human system, the court, the human court, with God. Like, but this reason is pretty bad because in the case of Christianity, when you are punished, you are punished eternally because the God is eternal, eternal. So it was the case of the king as well. If for example you hit the king, in the past the king was considered God, so your punishment would be death, like you'll be cut in piece, thrown in fire. So hell was never created to protect us. Hell was created to protect God. That's the reason why it's infinite punishment.
Yes, and this actually comes from some limited passages that are actually in the Bible, because there are a couple of passages that talk about the fire that's never quenched, right?
Jesus
So
says
when you
that.
start to use this type of
Jesus.
terminology, it makes people think, oh, this is eternal fire. And because they believe then that the God is eternal, that's kind of evolved into this belief of this eternal conscious torment. But eternal conscious torment is not actually found in the Bible. You can read it into the Bible, like a lot of, that's why there's so many different types of Christians, because you can read a lot of things into the Bible that aren't technically there, literally speaking, right? It's so much up for interpretation. And the concept of hell, because hell wasn't even a part of Judaism in First Temple Judaism. It did not come until the influence of the Persian period, which is Second Temple Judaism. So prior to that, even the Hebrews had no thoughts of this hell, right? They thought people just died and that was it. Then you get to the First Temple Judaism, where they're starting to be influenced by the Assyrians and the Babylonians, right? And then after the exile, the Babylonian exile, then Cyrus the Great comes in, as we all know historically, right? Around the 6th century, he takes over Assyria, conquers Assyria, uses it with the help of the Medes, takes over Babylon. Then he releases the Jews from the diaspora to go back to Jerusalem, and they rebuild the temple. And so now this is what we call the Second Temple period. Now you have the Persians who are running everything, right? And so the influence of Cyrus the Great, and who was who was Zoroastrian, and we even have evidence of this archaeologically, that we know Cyrus the Great was worshiping Ahura Mazda. The Persians were brilliant in their diplomacy, though, because what the Persians did was they would allow people to have their own religious beliefs and even their own local civic structures as well, as long as they paid their taxes to Persia. That's all Persia really cared about. You have to give soldiers to conscript to the army if they were required to go to war or something, and you pay your taxes. Other than that, you can worship your Yahweh God, you can worship Baal, you can worship Marduk, whoever you want. He didn't care, right? And he would even supplement them and fund some of these building projects as a humanitarian effort and to help gain their loyalty. So they're building the Second Temple. Well, in Zoroastrianism, there is this idea of this hell, but it's temporary, because, as I said before, once Ahura Mazda and the truth conquers the lie, which is the Druge, all people are restored, not just the good people, but literally everybody, because there's no lie anymore in existence. There's only the truth in existence. Therefore, there's no need for anyone to be punished for anything, because there's nothing in existence except for what is the truth, right? So you start to get this idea of this afterlife and this new heaven and new earth in Zoroastrianism. Then you start to combine that with what the Egyptians believed about the afterlife and the renewing of the sun with the dung beetle as the earth is renewed every day. Technically, this is a cyclic the cycle and the new year. And these ideas are developing. You're getting now influence from the Greco-Roman period as Alexander comes down and conquers, coming from Greece, conquers Cyrus and the Persians, and then the Egyptians. And the Jews are just in the middle of this massive, right in the middle of all this stuff happening. So you get Stoicism, you get Zoroastrianism, you get some stuff over from the East, Buddhism, and it's all coming together. And boom, now we get Christianity is what evolves out of this. And so we see this major changes historically happening. And so now people are trying to put all this together and say, well, when we read the Bible, which is one book, they say, even though it's really not, it's a collection of anywhere between 66 to 74 books, depending on which Bible you're reading, right? And they want to believe it's one book, it's univocal. We got to make sense of all this. And everybody comes up with a different answer at the end of the day, because it's not one book, it's multiple books over thousands of years, including multiple different traditions, you know.
I'll let you decide which topic I'm going to let you to choose which topic we talk now.
I would like to address just a couple of misunderstandings about what people have regarding Hume's guillotine, something you and I kind of mentioned. And I want to help people to understand objective morality from the secular position, because I debate this topic all the time, not just with Christians, but also with fellow atheists who are into philosophy, because they believe that morality is subjective. Now, I want to be very clear, whether morality is objective or subjective doesn't really matter, because it's a fun thing for us to think about and to debate in philosophy. What really matters is how are we going to treat each other, right? That's really what's important. So as far as objective versus subjective, this is just a way to discuss philosophy and some wonderful ideas. And I hear people misunderstand the conversation completely around morality, because people say, well, what is morality grounded in? How can it be objective? What's it grounded in? And that's a very simple answer. But what happens is people shift the conversation from the grounding of morality, which is an ontological question, or the ontology, right, to the normative, what ought we do and ought not do. So we need to understand that those are two different concepts. The grounding of something and the normative claim are not the same conversation. We can ground morality objectively in nature and the laws of cause and effect and evolution. We evolved to be a social species. So this is our grounding right here. And there's mind independent. And so it's objective. To get to the normative, the what ought we do, sometimes we have to deal with what's called Hume's guillotine. It's known as the is-ought problem, right? And there's a whole conversation to be had around that. Richard Carrier has done a wonderful job of breaking this down for people to help them understand that. And he relies on Kant to do this, actually. So that's really what Carrier is leading into is Immanuel Kant's attack of Hume, using the hypothetical imperative. When we incorporate the if, we know how to get the ought from the is. And the truth of the matter, as Carrier has pointed out, almost all of our oughts actually come down to an is at some point, right? Because everything is ultimately going to be based in some objective truth. So to say you cannot get an ought from an is a misunderstanding of Hume and a misunderstanding of how any ought comes to be. So we incorporate the hypothetical imperative, and Richard Carrier has a famous example which works really well. If a surgeon wants to perform a successful surgery, he ought to sterilize his equipment, right? So whether or not the surgeon wants to perform the successful surgery is subjective, but it's safe to assume that a surgeon does want to do this because they invest a lot of money. They sign a Hippocratic oath that says, I will do no harm, and so on and so forth. But we cannot say 100% that's going to be their goal, because all goals are subjective, right? So it is a subjective goal that the surgeon does want to perform the successful surgery. Once that goal is established, you can get objective facts, and because objective is both stance independent or any true fact is also objective, right? So it's a true fact that sterilizing your surgical equipment is significantly going to reduce your chance of introducing an infection. So you have objective facts attached to a subjective goal. The facts themselves, the action of what he's going to do is sterilize his equipment. When it comes to morality, morality is not a goal. People misunderstand this. Morality is an action. It's ought. What ought I do or ought not do? That's specifically talking about action, verbs, adverbs, right? We're going to attach it to a noun. What ought I do? The goal is subjective. Now, the goal that relates to morality is cooperation. So if we want to live in a society that focuses on cooperation, I ought not steal from people. And I can get that becomes an objective fact. So we can get to the normative of what we ought not do using true facts, which are objective. So we have objective morality, the grounding, and we have the objective morality as the normative behavior when we go through the hypothetical imperative.
So I do have a couple of comments. I think the first comment has to do with some recently Sam Harris did a debate with Rich Dawkins, and the Rich Dawkins Foundation, now it's called I think the Inquiry Institute. They gave Sam Harris a prize, which is a kind of big prize they give to people that defend critical thinking. Some of the people that received this prize was like Daniel Leeroy. Then Rich Dawkins asked Sam Harris precisely about the guillotine. Harris believed that this guillotine, people take it like it's a law of nature. He says that it's not a law of nature. People are like somehow kill themselves because David Hume created a kind of rule, a kind of, let's say, a rule a long time ago that you cannot derive out to from fact. Sam Harris basically says that we can ground morality on science, like neuroscience, empirical facts, so on. So basically, Sam Harris decided not to solve the problem. He decided just to say that this problem, we are killing ourselves for something that somebody said in the past, like you cannot. He basically said that the guillotine is let's say, it's fake. It's like you don't have to respect the guillotine. The second point I'd like to, then I give you the space to reply. I have to check that, but I have the feeling that Richard Carrot, he kind of, let's say, destroyed Kant, because if I remember well, you said that he based his work on Kant. I think I have to check that, but I think it was the opposite, because he gave an example, his paper, he gave an example of Kant. Kant basically said that there is a kind of imperative, like why should not steal, for example. I'm just giving a random example here. Why should not steal? Then you ask yourself, so why should not steal? Kant basically said that because you want to be a good person, that's all. Basically, if I remember well, Richard Carroll called this bullshit, because like Emmanuel Kant just create a kind of imperative that you should do just because you want to be a good person. That's all. He called, like, if I remember well, I have to double check on his paper, but if I remember how he called that a bullshit. So I think
I'm sorry, I did not mean to interrupt.
No, you can go on.
Yeah. So there is something really important to understand here. When I mentioned that Carrier pulled this from Kant, the hypothetical imperative was Kant's thing, and Carrier's using the same thing, the hypothetical imperative.
Yes, yeah, that's
what
correct.
Kant was using, that Carrier and a lot of people who reject Kant had two different models. He called the hypothetical imperative and what he called the categorical imperative. And it's the categorical imperative that it's just simply something is true in all cases, whereas we know that things are always going to be relative. So we cannot just say it's more of a Kant's has more of a deontological approach with the categorical imperative, and I think that's what Carrier and a lot of people reject. A lot of people who believe in objective morality actually reject that.
I think he rejects the idea that you have something that you have to do because you have to do. Because somehow Kurt, if I remember well, Kurt said like, why you should be a good person? Because you have to. Like there is no just because like a cosmic you decide.
Hmm.
Because the model of Richard Carroll is based on a game theory, like the prisoner
Hmm.
game.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
he basically saying that there is a physics of morality, that mathematically it's better that you be a moral person that you not being a moral person. It's like the example of, you gave the example of the surgery, but he gave another example as well. If my memory serves me well, he gave an example of being healthy. Why should I eat this way? Because you want to be healthy. So of course you can do otherwise, but if you are a logical person,
Hmm.
well informed, if you go, yeah, the moral thing to do is to eat in a good way. He gave the example of a vegan, like vegetarian. You can eat you can eat meat, but somehow you have to know that you are being immoral, because it's not about it. You said something like. You said as well that morality does not have a goal. I have the feeling that the model of Carey is the opposite, because Carey has three components. First, you have to be a rational agent. You need
Hmm.
to be able to think. A baby cannot be moral immoral, because a bird, if a bird shit your head, you can't say the bird is immoral, because the bird has no
Right.
nothing. It needs to be well informed. And then I gave to Rich Kerr the example of Donald Trump in his followers, because they are badly informed. So Kerr agreed with me. The third one, Kerr said that you need to have a goal. Then here come a bigger kind of a fight I had with Rich Kerr by email. I mean, you have a disagreement by email because of that. Kerry wrote a blog post a long time ago. He debated Christopher DiCarlo. He wrote a book in 2019, no, 2000, yes, 2019. He wrote a blog post about a debate with DiCarlo, Christopher DiCarlo. Sadly, the debate is not online anymore. I asked Rich Carroll for a copy of the debate. The debate is not available anymore. But I was able to find the book. Di Carlo just published the book like this year, called the Building a God. So this agreement was like that. Rich Carey believed that because I wrote a blog post, it was a provocative to Rich Carey. I don't know if he was very happy, but anyway, I provoked him because he wrote his blog post claimed that AI cannot be moral. AI cannot be a god of moral. My thesis is the opposite, the other way around. AI, according to Rich, if you take the model of Rich Carey from his paper from 2025,
Hmm.
then he described precisely AI. But
Hmm.
but people say AI does not have a goal, but you can build a goal on AI. You can give AI the example of that you in the previously on this live. I gave the example of the AI talking about religion. AI right now does not talk about religion spontaneously. That's because they gave AI a goal not to talk about a polemic topic. Religion is a polemic topic. So my point is, if I understood well the work of Richard Carroll used morality as a goal oriented.
Yeah, that's really interesting because there's a lot to unpack there. I think that it's really. I first of all, I agree very much with what Richard Carrier is saying, and I will also say that Richard Carrier, I believe it's a cosmological argument ultimately that he's using to describe this objective moral approach, and he's tapping into other ideas like at this point we all are doing. There's nothing new under the sun in 2026, right? We have
Like the Bible, we just say that up in the Bible. We
it's
just say
true.
the
It's
Bible.
true. Absolutely. So we are all tapping into some. We're standing on the shoulders of giants, as we like to say, right? People before us have done so much of the work. So we're looking at now when we talk about reason, and it's really important to understand this because this is really important. To it gets a lot of people get hung up on this when we talk about what is the normative, right? What people ought to do. The reason they call it normative is because it's like normal, and normal is going to be based on an average, right? What is the normal thing to do? And that's only accessible to people who have the ability to think and reason logically, right? If you don't have the capacity to reason, you don't understand what is normal. You don't have access to it. So the normative claim, it would be like a judge there. If you're in court and the judge is going to rule on your behavior, and you say, I had to shoot the man coming into my house because I felt like my life was in danger, my children's lives was in danger. The judge is going to say, what would a normal, rational person in this same situation, would they feel like their life is in danger, their children are in danger? Well, yes, absolutely. The man is breaking into your house, and you have this fear. Do you protect your family? Anything like this, what is a rational, normal person going to do? That's what the judge is going to base this against, what the jury is going to consider. What would a normal, that's what the normative is. So when we come to moral judgments, what ought I do? Well, is what ought a reasoning person do? A person who has a capacity to reason. A child cannot do this. A small child can't do this. There are adults who have dissociative or different types of mental disorders, antisocial personality disorder, for example, right? They don't have access to empathy. Their emotions don't work because the emotions come from inside the brain, right? And so they don't have access to morality. We don't make our moral decisions based on what would that person do, what would a psychopath do. No, we base it on what would a normal, rational. So the reasoning comes into play. When we talk reasoning, we're going all the way back to Aristotelian logic, right? Aristotelian ethics. And when he talked about virtue ethics and how do we understand what the virtues are, and reasoning gives us access to the morality. So Carrier's tapping into something that's well established. Ayn Rand, the objectivist, who has a completely different opinion about a lot of things with her views on capitalism and egoism, she has objectivism for the moral position. And she states that it is a human beings' ultimate purpose and ultimate quality is their ability to reason, and they need their freedom in order to be able to do this. So freedom and well-being is something that a lot of different people tap into. Sam Harris built this on flourishing, right? Human flourishing and the flourishing of the individual is going to be freedom and well-being is a necessary precondition for anybody to flourish. So they're all tapping into very similar roots of all this to come to the same conclusion that morality is indeed objective. They say all roads lead to Rome. The one thing I would say to push back a little bit is that a goal is going to be a value judgment, and all values are subjective. We can get a computer to spit out values, but that's after we have determined what the values are, right? So
That's the point that's the point of some health, because people criticize some health because some health has shows well-being. Like the goal is to optimize well-being. Like people say, why well-being? Like he says you have to choose something. You have to pick, like bootstrap yourself. You have to. A biologist cannot define what's life, but he still can do his work. A medical doctor cannot define what's a health state, but he still can do his work. Like that's the point of some errors. Like you have to define somehow. And Christian do as well. Christian they the only difference is that they like they give to a third party, like God. They decide like what's sin. Sin is when you go against God. So you are doing the same shit. Like you are just choosing different reference.
well, the reason that Christians are so dangerous as opposed to like the Jews, for example, is because when it comes to Jews, especially Orthodoxy, the Jews had 613 Mosaic laws clearly written out what they ought do and ought not do. Now, some of those laws are very dangerous because they promote slavery and misogyny and child abuse and such. But at least we know what we're working with because it's clearly written down. When it comes to Christianity and that you look throughout the New Testament, there's no codification of any particular set of laws. You get a little bit of hints like, oh, you should be loving, you should be kind, you should be patient, but those are all subjective values. What I think is loving is going to be completely different from what you think is loving, and it's going to be completely different than what my neighbor thinks is loving. Patience, same thing. All these different things are just values, and we individually come up with our own definition. So when you ask the Christian, what are the rules? Some Christians will say, oh, gay marriage is a sin. Other Christians will say, oh, it doesn't really matter. Gay marriage is fine, because there's no codification of any of these things. So the Christians are literally just making shit up as they go along, which is why I like to say that even though we say there's over 45,000 different types of Christianity, if there's about roughly 2 billion people on the planet are Christians, There's 2 billion different types of Christianity.
I don't know if you saw there is a series, there is a series called, I think, Midnight something. It's a series, a TV series, in which I think was four season. Basically, what the guy did, they were very smart. They took the Bible, they decided that Jesus would be a kind of vampire, a monster, a vampire. They have proven with four seasons that they fit very well, like the part like eat my blood, my flesh. The guy was I think it was very creative because they have shown that it's not hard for you to fit anything in the Bible, like a vampire, like a monster vampire, you can fit.
Yeah. That's brilliant. First of all, I've never heard that before, and it's absolutely brilliant. But it does go to show you.
Midnight missions. I don't know. I think it's worth it. Like they started atheist. Atheist in the beginning. The atheist. He was drunk. Then he hit someone. He killed someone. He killed a very young woman. He was very bad. But then he was sent to live his parents. But his parents was very religion in a very small town in the United States. Very religion. Then he had to go to church, so on. I think it's a very good one.
Yeah, it just goes to show just how open to interpretation the Bible is. And I mentioned this before in our conversation, and just repeat it really quick in case anybody's tuning in right now. Sorry, I'm starting to lose my voice. In these debates, when I debate biblical morality, the very first thing I do is talk about how disjointed and disconnected the Bible actually is. You cannot get a solid foundation of what is moral behavior and what is not moral behavior. So it's really up to interpretation. And that's why you should not use the Bible to try to explain any of your moral positions, because everyone's going to have a different interpretation of what it is. It's not an objective source if it's so open to interpretation.
Yes, yeah, you can go on because I let you to conduct the conversation. Now it's you. We stop you want to talk about. It's up to you.
Yeah, my voice is actually, I'm starting to lose my voice. We should probably start to wind it down. My tea is worn off. But I do want to encourage people to understand that when it comes to gauging the Bible and what we see, and this goes for any religion, it doesn't have to be just about Christianity or Islam or Judaism, any religion whatsoever. When you have a particular event happening, and we can use the Bible because we've been talking about it tonight so much. So like with the Amalekite situation, God tells Saul in 1 Samuel, I believe it's chapter 15, he tells Saul, I want you to go kill the Amalekites. You're going to destroy them, utterly destroy them. You're going to kill the men, the women, the children, even the animals. Everybody, wipe them out. Complete genocide. Well, we can look at that story and we can say from an outside perspective, because we have empathy as human beings, right? We don't need a God to tell us what's right and wrong per se, because we have a conscience. If we're rational, reasonable people, we know how we would want to be treated. We know how we'd want other people to treat us. Even if we were soldiers, if I was a soldier going to battle to fight for something that I believed was important enough to kill somebody over, I would never want to kill the children or the women, the non-combatants. I know better than this, right? And we know better as human beings. So we have the ability to make these judgments based on human nature. Just because God says,
I have this feeling that sometimes the recently I have a band. It's a digital band. It's an AI band in which I do music. I do so on. I wrote a song about the I think I don't know in English Jephthah, the Jephthah, the daughter of Jephthah. You say Jephthah in Portuguese. Basically, the story of a father that he make a promise. If he wins the war, he'll kill the first one that he just go out on the door. He decided to kill his daughter. Then the music was. I think the saddest music that I have read so far. It makes me cry sometimes when I see the music, when I see the clip I created using AI. I create Jephthah, his daughter using AI. It makes me cry sometimes when I hear this music. It's on the channel. But the point is that my challenge was like that. In the music, I trying to imagine what if a modern father today, a modern father has to kill his own daughter. The music was basically because of that. Sometimes you take the feeling of today and try to put in the past. Maybe the past it made sense. Maybe because for the concept of children, it's
Mhm.
recent. It's the idea of the children, like there's a children, adult people. It's a new concept. So maybe in the past, when the Bible was written, because we have to separate the concept of God and the story of the Bible. Maybe the story of the Bible they happened. Maybe the story is based on true fact. Especially the Old Testament. Old Testament. The Old Testament is also about like maybe in the past there was a tribe in which if you made a promise to God, you had to follow the promise. And his daughter, anyone like Job lost everything, like his
Mhm.
son. He got back his wealth. Some Christian they never ask what happened with the children, like 10 children. Maybe the past was okay for you to lose a children, but today it's not. But the point is, maybe the past was okay for you to kill everyone. Like it made sense in the past.
Well, that is the truth of it, and that's really unfortunate. But that is the reality of it: is that women and children both were seen as property, and it was this is how they were treated, as property, and the child was an investment in what the man who had the wealth, he was making an investment in himself, right? And so he would raise his children to help on the farm, or he would teach his child a trade. So if the man was a cobbler or an architect, a builder, his child would become the builder, the son would. If he had a daughter, the value of the daughter was in her virginity. So that virginity was the value that little girl possessed. And because it's all about property, the wife was the property of the man, and he could literally sell her as a concubine to another man to pay off his own debts, because this was just property to them. They didn't understand the moral implications. When you talk about, it's not just Jephthah, but you talk about one of the most famous stories would be Abraham and Isaac,
Yes,
right?
I
God
have a
said,
song
no,
about that. I have a song
yeah.
about that as well. I heavy metal. I do not heavy metal about that. I did
Mhm.
the same. I did that kind of trying to imagine. Imagine if we're talking. The music is as well. I trying to imagine someone talk to his own head, like his fight. Like I don't want to kill my son. I don't want to kill my son. God say you have to kill because I wanted to kill. I try to play around because imagine today you receive a message: kill your son to prove your love to me. It'd be very bizarre.
That's what I try to talk to people about. Like, we have the ability today, using all the tools that we've developed over the last 10,000 years, right? For not just agriculture, scientific method, but human developing ethics and human empathy, and really understanding the value that we have as human beings, the value that you possess as a human being with your own freedom and well-being actually adds value to my life, even though we're living so far away, right? North America to South America. And so we understanding the world is so small. They used to think that the world was only Mesopotamia and the Fertile Crescent, maybe part of Northern Africa, right? That was the entire world to them, to this culture that's writing these books. They had no idea there was an entire continent on the other side of the ocean. No idea whatsoever. They had no idea there's this place called Australia. They just didn't understand these things. So as we now understand, not only do these other places exist, but the planet is actually very small, like relatively speaking. It's not, it's as you get older and wiser, you start to understand that, oh my gosh, the world is very small. Because when you're a small child, you think your house, your living room is so big, and then you think your neighborhood is so big. And pretty soon your house and your neighborhood is not that big, because you're able to travel on a bicycle. And now it's your city, and you're driving a car. And now you can go from city to city. And then you get into an airplane for the first time and you go to another country, and you realize the world is not big. It's very small. Everything is connected, but it's only because of progression of science and our ability to look back at enough history of bad decision making compared to good decisions. That's when we now have the basis to reject these religious claims and say, no, we don't have to defend these claims. They're insane. To say that it would be justified to send somebody to hell for eternity is insane. There's no apologetic philosophically that can make that make sense. Killing women and children that are
They try,
non-combatant
they
doesn't
try
make
like
any
Momo.
sense.
They try like
Yeah.
Momo. They say that you are prepare yourself to God like preparation. They try.
It just doesn't hold up to today's understanding. And that's what scares me and makes me sad is that there are people who know it's the cognitive dissonance, right? They know in their head they're supposed to say that God knows best. They know in their head they're supposed to justify anything God does must be good by definition because that's what God is supposed to be. And so they will continue to say these things even though in their heart they know that this is not good.
Yes, that's what sometimes kills me. I sometimes I feel bad when I see a very a scientist like Rich Dawkins. Rich Dawkins said once why he will never debate William Craig.
Mhm.
William Craig is not stupid. As far as I could see, he's very smart.
Mhm,
But
mhm,
Rich Dog said like I have never seen that this debate, but I have never watched the debate. But according to Rich Dog, William Craig defended the Malachi, not the Malachite. It
mhm,
was I think it was another genocide in which William Craig said that the children will go to heaven, like they were killed, but God will send it to heaven. Then Rich Dog said, "That's my limit. I cannot go deeper than
mhm,
that." So when I see like Francis Collins, which I debated with Richard Carey, I talk about a lot about Richard Collins, Francis Collins, John
mhm.
Lennox. Those people, they're not stupid. I mean, but sometimes when I see those people defend Christianity, because the first time I saw John Lennox, I thought he's a mathematician at
Mhm,
Oxford. This guy must be
mhm,
smart. But
mhm.
when he talks about Christianity, he's as stupid as any pastor. I mean, it's
Yeah.
bizarre to see him talking.
It's so true. And that's exactly what cognitive dissonance is, right? It's when your emotions are telling you that what you're saying is wrong, but you're still insisting that it must be right. Right? It's not
Yeah,
a
but
it's that's not
I even have this feeling is somehow maybe he knows what he's doing because he's smart, but somehow he believes somehow in his head that Christianity is good. So I know it's not true, but it's good because it's impossible to imagine someone to be a professor at Oxford, a very high university, and the guy believed that Jesus exists, Jesus rose from the dead. Like I think I can't understand why people would do that.
yeah, it's this well because now I don't know what your position on free will is, but I do not believe in
I
free
saw
will.
I saw
Yeah.
you post a video.
I don't think the free will thing holds up. I'm a compatibilist or a soft determinist myself, but I think the debate is only between soft determinism or hard determinism. I don't think free will is even in the conversation, personally, but it depends on a person's perspective on free will because I know that Christians in particular will try to use free will as an excuse for suffering. Why is suffering in the world? Oh, well, because we got to have free will.
Yeah, free
But
will.
these are just really bad apologetics
Why
because
slavery? Why slavery? Because you have free will. Why
yeah, you got to have free will. The
children
people
is
would the
raped? Why
economy,
children is
as you
raped?
mentioned,
Free will.
yeah, the economy would crash if there weren't these slaves around. This which is ridiculous because we abolished slavery and no economies crashed as a result. And we can look at that
But
historically
no,
as
no. But in fact, they have a maybe if you are not talking about a god, like maybe it's true. If you abolish slavery before economy would crash, but the point is not that. The point is that it's a god, but a god can create anything. They could create economy that does not depend on slavery. They could do anything. But that's the point. The point is not that maybe the economy would crash in the beginning when the economy was started. Slavery was necessary. I'm not saying that's good. I'm saying that maybe they needed slavery. But the problem that you try to justify that a God that you are all powerful could not do otherwise. That's the problem for me.
like he could have had the slaves go free, and every time a slave walks away from a house, poof, a big bag of silver just appears out of nowhere, like the manna coming down from
They
the
could do
sky, right?
anything.
Could have fixed the economy right there. Everybody's rich. He could have done away with the need for money. No, this is
Because
what happened.
there is this example, Alex Conner. Alex Conner was debating on the Jubilee. I think it was Jubilee. He was debating several Christian, and he was debating a Mormon, and the Mormon was trying to explain that why do we suffer here? You see, have suffer. You have people have to suffer. He was saying that God has a place for us after that, but it's necessary to suffer now because God is waiting for us on the other side. And Alex O'Connor said in a very brilliant way, imagine that you have a cancer, a treatment for cancer, two treatment. One has a very big side effect. The one it has no pain. Why should I choose the one with side effect? Why cannot choose the one that has no side effect? If God is all powerful, why God has to do a world that's full of suffering? I mean, it makes no sense.
No, it doesn't make sense. It introduces almost all of the arguments that Christians make. Well, they're all fallacious, and that's what you have to know the informal and informal logic to be able to explain where the fallacies lay. But what most often happens, and what you're talking about right now, is they introduce what's called the black and white fallacy or the false dichotomy. It had to be this way, or this is the result. But there's a million different choices in the middle that they just refuse to acknowledge are even part of the conversation. But logically speaking, so like slavery, they say, well, why did you have to take the women, the virgin women, as slaves if you're killing everybody else? Oh, because
Yes, I even heard a very bizarre argument in a debate. Christian said that in the past, people volunteer themselves to be slave because some people
yeah,
volunteer to be
yeah.
slave. Therefore, slavery was good.
No, that's bullshit, and that doesn't match line up with the text or historically. But when it comes to like taking the women, for example, they would say, "Oh, well, if the soldiers just after they killed all the men, if they just left, those women would have died in the desert by themselves." And I said, "Wait a minute. So you have to make them your wife? Why don't they just send them resources? Why don't they just rebuild their town for them? Why don't they help them relocate? Why do you have to say, well, it's either make them a sex slave or they would die?" That's not the only two logical possibilities there. It's just this false
There
dichotomy that
is
they must
a
introduce to try to justify the behavior, and the same thing when it comes to the suffering. God could have given, let's just grant for the sake of argument that there is this thing called free will. Okay. Now, obviously, I don't believe it's true, but let's just grant that for a second. Just because there can be free will doesn't mean you have to have earthquakes and children being born with cancer. The two
oh,
don't match up.
lion eating a zebra.
Exactly. You don't have to have, you can allow people to freely choose God or not choose God without having so many of the things that are happening. Children should never be subject to the terrible things that children suffer from adults, from the choices that adults are making. Natural disasters should never happen. They should never be part of the conversation just because of free will, because you can have free will without earthquakes. I mean, the two just doesn't even make sense, but they pretend that there's this false dichotomy
I
where it
think
has to be this way
I,
to be this way.
I think what happened. I think what happened with Christianity that it does not update itself. For example, update itself. For example, in the past, it seems to me that they believed people used to believe that an action would have a consequence. For example, earthquake could be a punishment from the gods. So in the past, maybe it would make sense because people but people. I don't know if you notice that, but people still believe this kind of shit if you pay attention. For example, some people may believe that something bad happened to me because I did something bad with the other person. Like the universe is looking at you. Whenever you do something bad, the universe will punish you. Like it's a law. People still believe that. In Italy, I did my PhD in Italy. I remember there was an earthquake that killed half of the. There was a small. I used to live in a small town called Pitoli, a small town. Close to Pitoli was a very small town, very old. It was pretty old, like building pretty old. There was an earthquake. My small town has new building, so the building was able to stand because it was created to stand earthquake. But the other one was very old. Half of the small town was destroyed. There was a radio called Maria. The radio was accusing the earthquake was a result of the Italian. They were like too bad, so God decided to punish them. Like it's a Catholic country.
This is insane. And the other thing that blows me away is I find to be very frustrating at times. I try not to get too emotionally involved in this stuff because if you let it, it could really upset you. But like there was a natural disaster here last year where they had that flood in Texas, I believe it was, and the Christian camp that ran through this Christian camp, and like 75 little Christian girls got killed in this natural disaster because of this flash flooding, right? And I think that was in Texas. And the Christians we're using this as a way to somehow say, oh, praise God. God is so good. Those little girls are in heaven with Jesus. Praise Jesus. And I'm thinking to myself, that is so
Sick.
insane. How could you possibly not say, if you believe that this God is true, is real, how can you not say, God, why would you take these little girls in such a terrible way if you wanted them in heaven with you? You know, I have this conversation. I did an informal debate with a Christian here about a week ago, or 2 weeks, whatever it was, right before I got sick with this cold. And we were talking about morality. And there's a thought experiment. It's called snap or drown, right? And so if I grant the Christian that the global flood had to happen, which is a big stretch because that's the dumbest story in the Bible, but let's just, we grant that the global flood happened, that God needed to wipe out everything. Why drown everybody? Why make a mother have to suffer as she's got 3
The
children and
dog,
only 2 arms? You
even
have to
the
watch
dog,
one of her children
there's
die
a
first.
meme.
Then she's going to watch the other children die. Then she's finally going to lose this child. Then she's going to drown. Why do this to the animals? It makes no sense. If they had to go away, why not just snap your finger, poof, everybody's gone, no problem. The world is instantly renewed. It doesn't have to be renewed with new people. Let Moses or Noah, who I guess is Noah and his family, re-inhabit the earth. But the animals could be brought back, everything. It just, the whole idea that, well, because the world was sinful, God needed to kill them. Let's drown them all. And that's a good way of doing it,
There is a let's say cartoon. It's a let's say it's a atheist cartoon. They created in the internet. They did precisely like that. They took Superman and Batman. They're supposed to act as the Bible. Then, then in the cartoon, the Batman decided to drown everyone. So the guy that's supposed to be the bad guy asks, say it again? Because the guy could not understand that Batman was trying to kill. Let's flood everyone because they're pretty bad. Batman, I'm not going to save anyone anymore. I'm Gotham City. I'm not the one to fight crime. Let's kill everyone. The guy said, like, say it again? Like the bad guy. Asked because they couldn't understand. Like, he's supposed to be the bad guy. Imagine God. Imagine our superhero like Batman, Superman act like God. I mean, they'd be horrible. No one would ever like this guy.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's some people on the internet who do a really good job. I am going to have to wind it down. I am losing my voice. But Justin his name is Justin. He has a YouTube channel called Deconstruction.
I saw him Atheist Experience. I think he participated. Justin.
I think he is. Because Atheist Experience is Matt Dillahunty's deal, isn't it? With the line.
No. The Dillahunty is out now. Now they do a kind of they keep changing like.
Okay.
I think I saw Justin there. Justin, the guy with the beard, like.
Yes. Yeah.
The big hair.
He's got a master's degree in, I believe, Old Testament studies, so he knows the Bible.
Yes, I think I know
really,
him. I know.
Really well.
Yes, I know. He knows a lot.
Yeah,
I think he knows about as well for the Quran and so on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he does a great job highlighting some of these things, and talking about this. And he has an analogy where he gets Christians to basically work their way into this corner where he gets them every single time, and it's he calls it the baby paste. If God told you to make baby paste, and
yes, I saw some of them.
Yeah, and the Christians will every single time they'll bite that bullet.
I saw the hamburger made of children. Would you eat the hamburger?
Yeah,
I think I remember that.
Yeah, and it's crazy. And I actually had a Christian say the same thing to me because I was talking, like I said, about a week or so ago, I was talking to a Christian about morality in the Bible, and I was explaining to him about how we understand morality through reason and through empathy, right? And we can look at human flourishing as an example, and what's worked and what hasn't worked historically to understand what we should do and shouldn't do, the behavior that's acceptable. And none of that lines up with the Bible. And the Christian was just trying so hard to defend it. And I went down the same road with the baby paste. I said, so if God told you to chop up little children into tiny little pieces, one finger at a time, would you do that? Would that be the right thing to do? And he's like, well, yes, if God said to do it. And I'm like, holy shit, there's literally nowhere for the conversation to go. If a person's going to bite that rhetorical bullet, what do you say to somebody like that?
Yeah, because sometimes I know that your voice is almost out. And there is this example as well, the atheist experience. The trick is the same. I have done this trick with a friend of mine. He's a Catholic. but I saw the atheist experience. They are talking to a Christian atheist experience. They first make a question: do you believe that slavery is wrong? The guys say like, I think you should. The guys say things like, you should have slavery. But suddenly, the guy, the Matt, he decided to pull the Bible and say, see, here in the Bible, it says it's like correct. Like the guy literally changed his mind. In the world, I have done a similar case. I have a friend. I know him for a very long time. We have a common friend that LGBT. We have more than one friend that they are LGBT. Uh, People pretend they are not LGBT, but everyone knows they are LGBT. I asked him like, we have this friend in common, so I asked him, do you believe that to be a gay is wrong? Because since you have this friend in common, I thought he will not dare to say that's wrong, because you have several friends that are gay. He said, no, I don't have anything in problem with that. I told him, but do you know that the Bible says that to be gay is wrong? The guy like changed his mind, like when you say the Bible say that's wrong, they just change their mind, like
Yeah, I again, this is one of the reasons why I think it's perfect evidence that we don't have free will. You know, so our subconscious is doing all the work, and then it
so you
spits
are
out the
like
information.
Robert Sapolsky. You are like the same style of Robert Sapolsky, or like Richard Carroll.
Yes, yes.
Richard Carroll in the
Sapolsky's
middle.
great.
Richard Carroll. So you are in the middle. You are like Richard Carroll or Sapolsky?
I'm in the middle because I don't know. I don't know. I haven't spoken to Richard Carrier about free will. I
Because
would assume
Carroll, according to his blog, he's like Daniel Dennett. He believes like there is a kind of freedom, like even to do well is a kind of a partial free will, like you can have
compatibilism.
part
Yep,
compatibilism, like
yep.
in the case of
That's where I'm at.
Sapolsky,
Yep. It's
Sapolsky like
supposed.
deterministic.
It's hard
Sapolsky like he
determinism.
does not believe at all in free will.
But now I have to admit that I haven't read all of Sapolsky's work. I've actually got one of his books that I intend to get into, but it's a
Determined or
very
behavior.
it's heavy reading. It's heavy reading, and I'm not in biology. This is a field I haven't really spent a lot of time in, so it's going to be heavy work for me to get through.
No,
But Sapolsky,
now I use chatbot. Like you can put the book on the chatbot. Like you go for a walk, you just talk to the chatbot.
interesting. I have to think about maybe doing that. But Sapolsky, he has hard determinism, but somehow he still believes that there's decision making processes that are going on there, and I don't know how he's put that all together because it
Now
seems to me hard to.
he's a determinist. Like he does not believe that according to him, we don't have like you have zero. Anything that you do according to him can be explained by a sequence of events.
Yes, right,
So
right.
according to his model, we are like he gives the example of the broken car. If a car he give an example. Suppose a car has a brake. The brake fails. Like he hit someone. He make a joke. You don't send the car to the hell of cars, like to burn the car forever. You fix the car and put the car on the street again. So he says the same, that when someone commits a crime, the person is broken. So in our current system, you decide to put the person in jail, they stay in jail forever. He said that you should fix people because people are
Mhm.
determined.
Yeah, I'm 100% in agreement with that. I have recently started doing talks about the justice system in America. It's really broken. There are other countries that are doing so much better when it comes to the prison system, and we see the results in recidivity, right? The how many people are actually returning to prison in America. It's upwards of about 80%, almost 80% of people that are incarcerated will end up back in prison with, I think it's within 5 years. And you have to think about if we had any business model with a failure rate of 80%, they would go out of business
But
immediately. It would never be successful with something like that. And yet that's what our justice system is here in America. And it's astounding. And people say, well, there's nothing we can really do about it. But then you look at other countries like Norway, for example, their recidivity rate over that same time period, 2%, 2% compared to 80%. Huge, massive difference. It's not even like they're not even playing the same game almost. You know what I mean? The difference is so wide. So there are definitely programs that can be put into place. There's ways of effectively dealing with criminals. And it's not just locking them away, just locking them in prison for a period of time. Like you put a child on a timeout That doesn't solve the problem. You've got to institute education. You've got to inform the individual, the child or the criminal, why their behavior is wrong. You also got to help them understand the personal motivation of why they want to do better, right? Like I was talking about before, my selfish motivation to live my best life includes my neighbor living his best life, right? Making sure my neighbor has enough to eat. That's how I make sure that I'm not going to get my food stolen. So we can teach the child, we can teach the criminal if they have the mental capacity to understand these things. Some criminal behavior is going to be based on a deficiency, a mental deficiency that cannot be fixed, at least not currently. Now, we may develop the technology at some point to tap into the brain and rewire some of these signals that are not connecting, which would be wonderful, but we're not there yet. So at some point, there are some people we may have to just set aside. But if we set them aside, we have to understand that we still need to treat them well to provide them with a certain amount of well-being, right? Not just lock them away in solitary confinement or something, but we need to provide a life for them to be morally justified, in my opinion. But what we
Yes,
can't do, we can't have axe murderers running around the streets. We know that, right?
yes. Yeah, that's a very good conversation. I know about your voice, so I'm going to let you go. But if you want to go, I'd like to thank you for coming to my channel, for accepting to do the live on my channel. You can do a second party on your channel. I already accept. I do a pre-accept or any possible future invitation as a way to thank you to accept and to come to my channel. And in the future, I'll be glad to be on your channel, like doing a second part of the conversation.
Yes, brother. I really am grateful for the opportunity. I always relish a chance to speak to people who I respect. I've looked at
I think
I
there is a
I
there,
think
there,
it was
there was a problem. You should repeat again because your internet just
oh
gave a problem.
yeah, absolutely, brother. I just want to say I very much appreciate you bringing me on and letting me speak with you today. It's always a great pleasure for me personally to speak to people that I respect, and I have been really enjoying your content. I really especially liked what you just recently did. We touched on it today. You talked about AI and morality, and can we use AI to basically start to fill these roles of educator, teaching about morality? And I think there's a great conversation to be had around the uses that we can get out of AI, and it's been such a pleasure speaking to you today. I almost rescheduled with you because my voice is really shot, but I did not want to miss the opportunity. I don't want you to feel like you're not a priority for me or I wasn't really excited about this opportunity and just call in sick. So I appreciate you bearing with me and your audience for bearing with my throat. I know it sounds really rough, but yeah, I would definitely be interested in having some future conversations with you. We touched on a few things today. This last topic about the justice system would be a great conversation because it talks about morality. We could incorporate AI, the justice system, and we could really tie all that together, I think, to look at how to make significant changes for the better.
Perfect. So I think you know how to use I think you know how to use StreamYard. So I'm going to close the live, but I'm going to say hi, say goodbye to you in private. So do not close the browser. Some people close the browser. So thanks everyone for being here. I should remind you that this live will be available in more than 20 languages, which include Portuguese. The YouTube make a translation. When you speak in English, YouTube making the live available in more than 20 languages: Portuguese, French, and my guest today here, Daniel Leeroy, he has his own channel. I totally recommend you to go there. If he can correct me, but I think he has a focus also on outfit. I think fitting. I think you remember well. Some tips how to make exercise, so on. So I totally recommend you to follow his channel. It's on the description. In the future, I'm going to send him an invitation. When you subscribe to the channel, you're going to see his channel as well. Just subscribe to both channels and enjoy the content. So see you in the next live.